The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So the rich man summoned the manager and said to him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you can no longer be my manager.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking my position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig. I am ashamed to beg. I know what I will do when I am dismissed as manager, so that people may welcome me into their homes.' So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil.' He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat.' He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. Then the master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. Because the children of this age are much more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light." The Gospel inspired by God. The genre had not yet been invented, but if it had, Jesus would have been a master at it. I'm talking about the detective story. You know, the Agatha Christie's of the world, where you read through the whole thing and you think you understand who the killer is, and then in the last few pages there's a twist in the tale and you're suddenly blindsided. Jesus has this extraordinary passion for doing this in his storytelling. He goes right through in his story and you're unpacking it, think you understand it, and then at the very end there's a twist in the tale and you're left wondering what happened here. And so right through this story today of the rich man who had a steward, and the steward is embezzling his property, and it looks like the good guy is the rich man and the bad guy is the steward who's embezzling the property. And at the end of the heel of the hunt, the hero turns out to be the manager, the guy who's embezzling left, right and centre. He's the guy who turns out winning. And finally, even the master has to say to me, "You know what? He bested me. He had the last laugh." Because this guy was able to look out for himself when he was employed and when he was unemployed. So there's an extraordinary twist in the tale. So you've heard me say many, many times that parables are an extraordinary way in which you can take a teaching and go back to it several times in your lifetime and understand it differently each time. Or a group of people can hear the same parable and each one of us is unpacking it according to our own abilities. That's the beauty of the storytelling. And many times I said to you that my opinion is that many of the parables of Jesus, ostensibly they seem to be, that the good guy is God and the bad guy is us individual human beings, sinners. And it's a story of some kind of a conflict, between the good guy, God, and the bad guy, which is us. And so we think of this story very often that the rich man is God, who's given, us charge of his property in some way, and we're the bad people because we screw up and we sin and whatever. And I've suggested to you many times that it's not about God and about us. That is, most often, it's about the relationship between the soul and the ego, between that part of us which is eternal and that part of us which is incarnated. And what goes on between the two, are they working together, or are they working against each other? Today I want to unpack it slightly differently. I want to suggest that in some senses this is a parable not about God and human beings, or not even between the individual soul and the individual ego, but between a community and its culture. Because in some senses the ego of a community is the culture, the way in which it lives its life. So I want to unpack that a little bit today in that sense. If the rich man in some senses is a group of people, a soul pod, like a COJ, who have made what I've called a preconception contract. We've agreed long before we're incarnated to come in, to meet each other, and to be very significantly involved in each other's lives for a period of time. So there's our soul pod, and there's our agreement. And then we create a culture as a community, and the culture is like the ego of the community. And the question is, is the culture and the community working together, or are they at disparate, at loose ends? Just like the individual ego, is it working with the soul? Are they a team together? Are they working at variance with each other? And my suggestion is that, every community creates a culture. And in some senses, the culture is the ego of the community. And we're a community because we have a soul agreement. There's a soul pod who came in to work together. So my experience in this community is that this is a place in which the ego of a group and the community itself, the culture in the community, has worked really, really, really beautifully over the years. It's such a privilege for us to, I'm going to just trace our history a little bit here in this little church here. When we started with Companions on the Journey way back in 96 and 97, and we started using this little church here. Initially we were meeting on Thursday mornings and Saturday mornings, and for some reason at some stage we shifted it to Friday and Saturday, and then the Fridays took off. There was a special energy, and you know that. There was a special energy about these Friday morning celebrations, and many of you here were in that from the beginning. Johanna was there, Michael was there, Cecile was there, Maureen was there, Margaret Park was there, Margaret Park was there, Helen was there. So many of us were members of that community from the very beginning. And Friday mornings became really, really, really special to us. It was in this container that we tried out some of the experiments that we then took to the big church later on. It was in this church, this little place here. I'm just emotional. It was in this little church here that we took the Eucharistic prayer of the cosmos for the first time, and we began to divvy up parts among ourselves. We celebrated it as a group of priests, not as just a community listening to, some patriarchal figure declaiming it. We stood around the altar here. This was the first place that we stood around the altar every single morning, and we celebrated as a community, and we took parts being the priest saying this Eucharistic prayer of the cosmos. This was the first place where we took the notion of a shared homily, and hats off to Margie. Margie's the one who invented this, where at the end of the homily, Margie would always have a question, and the question would lead to a discussion, and the discussion would lead to extraordinary ideas. And then we took this idea and we brought it to the big church at some stage. On the third Sunday of the month, we had the interactive homily. So it began right down here. This was the first place that, individual members of the community took responsibility for creating liturgies when I was away. Very, very often Bishop Rosamond would come in, and help us out here. But people stepped up from the community and took charge of the liturgies. And we took that to the big church under the leadership of Karen eventually, where the fourth Sunday every month, a member of the community takes over and is the priest for the community for that day. So much of what has happened in the larger community has been gestated in this Friday morning group. Kathleen Lyons first birthed the notion here of women in black, that was then taken down to Palo Alto on Friday mornings. This was where she first mooted this idea. And this is where Margaret Park for the first time. Margaret would invite us to her home every Friday morning after the Mass. And unfortunately, because I was working at 9 o'clock every Friday morning, I never got the chance until this morning, with God's help, to go visit and take part in that. And my understanding is that some of the great discussions, some of the great ideas that filtered into the bigger community started in Margaret's house on Friday mornings. That all of you guys coming together, brainstorming and thinking through how to really vivify a community, they were coming from Margaret's house and from this community here. So it's with a really, really heavy heart that I have to, at this stage, pull my participation from the Friday Masses out. This has been a really, really big year for me, for many reasons. I turned 70 and we had an extraordinary celebration. I lost 4 very, very close friends in the course of about 5 weeks in September and October. 3 of them whom you know very well. Kathleen Lyons, our matriarch here, and Lou Schaefer and Patricia Weaver, and a friend of mine, Geneva Hartle, who was a scientist at SRI, a very, very close friend of mine who died very suddenly, at the very end of August. She and I, in fact, had just started a big prayer study. We'd involved this chief statistician in SRI where she worked. Geneva was doing this literature review. He was doing the statistics and I was doing the design. And we started that and that fell asunder because of Geneva's death. So a whole bunch of stuff happened. And it seemed to me that I had this health issue that I needed to start making significant changes in my life and pulling back and deciding where I wanted to put my energy, for the next phase of my life. And when it came down to it, a choice between either being a therapist or being the spiritual director for COJ, it was a no-brainer for me. So I stopped my practice. Literally yesterday, I went and I emptied out my office. I'm not seeing clients down there anymore. So, but my energy and my commitment at this stage, is to the COJ community. So I will be, God willing, coming down every single Sunday, including the fourth Sunday, to be a member of the community, watching somebody else lead the liturgies for us. And so that's where I'm putting my energy in the foreseeable future. So at the end of today's parable, the rich man says something very, very strange. He says, the rich man praised the unjust steward insofar as he had acted shrewdly, because the children of this generation are wiser to their kind than the children of light. So it seems as if the rich man who's been defrauded of his property is, commending the guy who did the embezzling. It seems like he's saying, hats off to him. He turned every situation to his own advantage. And the reason behind it is this, that in this story, this steward was able to turn every situation to his own economic advantage. When he was employed, he was embezzling left, right, and centre. But even when he got fired, he was able to turn that situation and bring in the master's debtors and make sure he was going to get a bakshishi when he left. And Christ is saying, that is what the spiritual life is about. There's neither good luck nor bad luck. Everything that happens, everything that occurs in your life is an opportunity for making hay. It's an opportunity to turn it into an occasion of grace. So I think of that right now for our little community here, how we proceed at this stage, and what will happen to the Friday morning group. How are you going to continue and continue to nourish that? How do we continue as a community? How do I myself, with this health challenge, how do I continue to make that a blessing, so that for the next stage of my life, no matter what I experience or what I encounter, it's an opportunity for blessedness. For me, maybe it is to begin for the first time in my life after 70 years on the planet to really acknowledge that I have a physical body, that it has needs. It needs to sleep, it needs to rest, it needs to eat. And not having done that for 70 years, and say, okay, I have to. That's part of the incarnation. Is I incarnated. This was not just a vehicle to carry a head around so I could talk about stuff. This is something I need to honour and be grateful for as well, and for our community. So whatever situation we find ourselves in as individuals now and as a community now, it's an opportunity to be able to have God say about us, this was a community that turned every situation to its own spiritual advantage. So for me, the bigger message is that there is no situation in which we find ourselves which cannot be turned to our own spiritual advantage. I've used this example before, the difference between fate and destiny. We use these words kind of as synonyms. We think fate and destiny are the same thing, and they're very, very different. Fate is the realization that the hand I've been dealt is precisely the hand, I planned before I came into incarnation. And so it's the realization, wow, I got exactly what I planned. Now, how am I going to play that hand? And that's destiny. Destiny is the result of how I played the hand I was given. So karma is not a punitive mechanism whereby I'm punished in subsequent incarnations for sins I've committed in previous incarnations, but rather karma is the realization, wow, before I came down, I planned precisely to have this physical body, this precise physical body, be born at that particular family, in this particular culture, at this particular stage of human history. That was exactly what I asked for, and I got it. And now how am I going to do that? And so every situation which I find myself is an opportunity to live that out and to create my destiny, a destiny of alignment. And Christ is saying this morning, there is no situation in which you will find yourself. There's no relationship in which you will find yourself. There's no circumstance you'll encounter which you can't actually turn to your own spiritual advantage and the spiritual advantage of others through acting in compassion or whatever. Now, I think that's true of us as individuals and as a community. And I'm totally convinced, I've said this to you many times before, that this is a community of people who are part of a soul pod. We encountered each other and we spent the last 20 years together in a very significant way because we contracted to that. We didn't just happen upon each other. Margie and Manny didn't just happen to come across, the Atlantic from Malta to get here. Ursula didn't happen just to come from Germany to get here. I didn't just happen to come from Ireland to get here. We planned to be part of a community together. That was our soul contract. The question then becomes, how well have we been playing that card? And my opinion is, as a community, we played it really, really, really well. That we have really, there's been an extraordinary dance that's gone on between the community and the culture. The community being the kind of the soul of the organization, and the culture being the ego. How the soul interacts with its environment. So what I hear Christ saying is, there is no situation we've encountered as a community, the ups and the downs, the good and the bad times. There's no situation we have encountered which it was not an invitation for us to grow as a community. And I think we've done an extraordinary job in doing that. For the fun of it, I want to find out, where did everybody come from in order to be part of this community? So I mean, it's amazing to me that from all these different places and all the different peregrinations, that we all wound up forming a community in Pallet. That's not accidental. And for me, the greatness of it is that this community has stayed true to its contract, true to its preconception contract, true to its mission, that the culture and the community, have danced together rather than being at variance with each other. I'm deeply grateful. From County Cork, via East Africa. Yeah.
What town were you born in?
I was born in Cork City. Yeah. I lived on the coast in Cove, the big port for a while. Yeah. But then grew up in Cork, and then 14 years in East Africa. So many of us have been the beneficiaries of the prayers of the group. As we're looking around, people here who've had to deal with health issues themselves, and how the group, was there for us, every one of us, in our need. Yeah. So I'll stand and pray for this community, guys. God, our Father and our Mother, we thank you again this morning for the miracle of a brand new day, in which we can attempt to be channels of love, of light and of logos, of life and of laughter, of wisdom and information for our planet and for our times. For this we pray to the Lord.